For nearly 7 years, my job required constant travel. I worked as a regional software trainer for a medical equipment company, which basically meant driving from city to city, teaching hospital staff how to use expensive machines that most people would never understand. It paid well, but it came with a downside. I spent more nights in anonymous hotel rooms than I did in my own apartment. After a while, every hotel started to blur together. The same generic paintings bolted to the walls, the same humming air conditioners, the same stiff white sheets that always smelled faintly of bleach. I never cared much about where I stayed. As long as the place had a bed, hot water, and a functioning lock, I was satisfied. That mindset changed 2 years ago during a trip to Western Ohio. I had been assigned to lead a 3-day training seminar at a small private clinic in a town called Crestview. It was the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked while driving through. There was one main street, a few chain restaurants, and an old shopping plaza that looked like it had been slowly dying since the late 90s. My company booked me into a hotel called the Willow Creek Lodge. Even the name sounded depressing. When I pulled into the parking lot just after sunset, I immediately noticed how isolated it felt. The building stood at the edge of town, backed by a thick line of pine trees that stretched for what looked like miles. The hotel itself was 3 stories tall with faded beige walls and narrow windows. Half the neon letters on the sign were burnt out, so from the road it only read Willow Creek Lodge. Not exactly comforting. Inside, the lobby smelled like old carpet cleaner and stale cigarettes. A middle-aged man sat behind the front desk reading a paperback novel. He barely looked up when I entered. "Checking in?" he asked. I nodded and gave him my name. He typed slowly, handed me a key card for room 307, and pointed toward the elevator without saying another word. No welcome, no mention of breakfast, nothing. That should have been my first sign something was off. The 3rd floor hallway was eerily silent. Most hotels have some background noise. TVs muffled through walls, ice machines rattling, distant conversations. This hallway had none of that. It was so quiet that my rolling suitcase wheels sounded obnoxiously loud against the carpet. Room 307 sat near the far end of the corridor. The room itself looked normal enough. Queen bed, small desk, flat-screen TV mounted crookedly on the wall, generic landscape print above the headboard. The only unusual thing was the window. It faced the woods behind the hotel, and even though it was only around 8 p.m., the darkness outside looked unnaturally thick, as if the trees were swallowing all available light. I remember standing there for a moment staring at them. Something about that view made me uneasy. Still, I was exhausted after 5 hours of driving. I ordered takeout from a nearby diner, answered a few work emails, showered, and crawled into bed around 11. For a while, everything was normal. Then I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure what had disturbed me. The digital clock beside the bed glowed 1:43 a.m. The room was completely dark, except for the faint orange light filtering through the curtains from the parking lot. I lay there listening. That's when I heard it. A soft scraping sound, very faint, like paper sliding slowly across carpet. It came from the direction of the door. I sat up immediately. The sound stopped. For several seconds, there was complete silence. Then it came again, slow, deliberate. My stomach tightened. I switched on the bedside lamp and looked toward the door. A small folded piece of white paper was sticking halfway beneath it. I stared at it for several seconds, too confused to move. My first thought was maybe it was some kind of receipt or hotel notice, but why would anyone slide it under the door at nearly 2 in the morning? I got out of bed and picked it up. The paper had been torn unevenly like it came from a notebook. It had handwriting on it, messy, jagged, as if written in a hurry. It said, "You should keep your curtains closed." That was it. No name, no explanation, just that one sentence. I looked instinctively toward the window. The curtains were partially open. Beyond them, the black outline of the forest stared back. I quickly shut them. Then I checked the pier hole. The hallway was empty. No movement, no footsteps, nothing. I considered calling the front desk, but what would I even say? Someone left me a weird note? It sounded ridiculous. I locked the deadbolt and chain latch, then sat on the edge of the bed trying to convince myself it was some stupid prank. Maybe bored teenagers, maybe another guest. Eventually, my heart rate slowed. I was just starting to relax when I heard it again. That same scraping sound. This time, slower. I froze. Another piece of paper slid beneath the door. I approached cautiously and picked it up. The handwriting was shakier than before. It read, "I saw you looking outside. Don't do that again." A cold wave rushed through my body. This wasn't random. Whoever wrote these notes was watching me, and they knew exactly what I'd done. I rushed to the pier hole again. Empty hallway. No sound. No retreating footsteps. Nothing. That was when fear truly set in. The kind of fear that makes your body feel disconnected from your thoughts. I scanned the room, suddenly hyper-aware of everything. The closet, the bathroom, the space beneath the bed. I checked them all. Empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I grabbed my phone and dialed the front desk. It rang 6 times before the same man answered. His voice sounded irritated. I explained the notes. There was a long pause, then he said something strange. "Sir, no one should be on your floor tonight." "What does that mean?" "Only 2 rooms are occupied up there, yours and 312. I glanced toward the door. Room 312 was several doors down, too far for someone to slide notes under my door without being seen. Before I could ask anything else, he muttered, "I'll come check." He hung up. I waited by the door, listening. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No footsteps ever came. No knock, no callback, nothing. I was about to call again when I heard the scraping sound for a 3rd time. Slow, almost playful. The paper slid halfway under the door and stopped. My hands shook as I bent down and picked it up. This note had only 6 words. "He doesn't know I'm still here." And just as I finished reading it, something heavy thudded inside the bathroom. The sound from the bathroom was so sudden and violent that I actually dropped the note. It wasn't a soft creak or the settling noise old hotels make. It sounded like something heavy had slammed into the wall. For a moment, I just stood there frozen, staring at the bathroom door. Every instinct screamed at me to run. The bathroom light was off, and from where I stood near the bed, all I could see was the pitch-black doorway. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe something had fallen off the counter. Maybe the vent rattled loose. Maybe... Then I heard a breathing. Slow, uneven, coming from inside the bathroom. My entire body locked up. It was unmistakable. Someone was in there, and judging by the sound, they were standing very still, trying to stay quiet. I backed toward the room door, my pulse hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. The chain latch was still secured, the deadbolt still locked. No one could have entered through the hallway. That left only one possibility: the window. The thought made me feel physically sick. Had someone climbed in from outside? Room 307 was on the 3rd floor. Impossible. At least it should have been. The breathing stopped. For 3 agonizing seconds, there was absolute silence. Then the bathroom door began to open, slowly. The hinges barely made a sound. A narrow sliver of darkness appeared, then wider and wider. I didn't wait to see what emerged. Adrenaline finally overpowered paralysis. I ripped the chain latch free so hard that the metal screws tore partially from the frame, yanked open the door, and bolted into the hallway. The corridor was empty. My socks slipped slightly on the carpet as I sprinted toward the stairwell. I didn't even consider the elevator. I flew down 3 flights, nearly missing steps, and crashed through the lobby doors, gasping for breath. The front desk was empty. The chair behind it sat pushed back as if someone had just stood up. The paperback novel the clerk had been reading was still open on the counter, but he was gone. "Hello?" My voice cracked. No response. I shouted louder. Still nothing. That's when I noticed something lying on the desk. a folded piece of white paper. My stomach dropped. I unfolded it. The same jagged handwriting covered the page. Wrong way. I didn't stop to think. I ran straight for the lobby exit, shoved through the glass doors, and sprinted across the parking lot to my car. My hand shook so violently that I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock it. The second I got inside, I slammed the locks down and looked back toward the hotel. At first, nothing moved. Then I saw someone standing in the third-floor window of room 307. Just a silhouette, tall, perfectly still, watching me. A second figure stepped into view beside it, this one shorter and broader. The two shapes remained motionless, side by side, staring down into the parking lot. One of them slowly raised an arm and tapped against the glass. 3 times. I threw the car into reverse so fast I nearly hit a parked truck. I peeled out of the lot and drove without direction for almost 20 minutes before pulling into a brightly lit 24-hour gas station in the next town. Only then did I call the police. 2 officers met me there. I told them everything. The notes, the bathroom, the figures in the window. To their credit, they took me seriously enough to drive back with me to the hotel. When we arrived, the building looked completely dark. No lights in the lobby, no lights in room 307. Nothing. One officer knocked repeatedly at the entrance. No answer. After several attempts, they forced their way inside. The lobby was empty, the front desk abandoned, no sign of the clerk. They escorted me upstairs. Room 307's door stood slightly open. I knew with absolute certainty I had slammed it shut behind me. The officers entered first, weapons drawn. The room was empty. Bathroom empty. Closet empty. No broken window. No sign anyone had been there. And strangest of all, the notes were gone. Every single one. The only unusual thing was the bathroom. The officer closest to the shower called us over. Scratched in the fogged bathroom mirror were 6 words, as if traced by a finger from the outside. You should have stayed inside. I refused to spend another second in that building. The officers escorted me out, took my statement, and arranged for me to stay elsewhere that night. The next morning, I called my company and canceled the training. I drove home. 3 days later, one of the officers contacted me. He sounded unsettled. The hotel had been closed indefinitely. Apparently, after reviewing old records, investigators discovered something disturbing. 8 years ago, a man named Leonard Griggs worked the overnight desk shift at Willow Creek Lodge. He disappeared during his shift. No body was ever found. The investigation uncovered evidence that Griggs had secretly been living inside unused maintenance spaces throughout the hotel for months. He apparently developed an obsession with watching guests. Police found dozens of notebooks hidden in the walls. Most were filled with detailed observations about people who stayed there, what they wore, what they ate, when they slept. Some entries described him entering occupied rooms, standing over sleeping guests, watching them breathe. Then there was the final notebook. Its last entry was dated the night he vanished. It read, "They finally let me stay. Room 307. No one ever figured out what that meant or where he went. The hotel was demolished less than a year later. Officially, it was due to structural problems and declining business. Unofficially, locals believed the place was cursed. I haven't stayed in a hotel alone since, and even now, 2 years later, whenever I check into one for work, the first thing I do is inspect every inch of the room, the bathroom, the closet, under the bed, behind the curtains. Every time. Because sometimes, usually when I'm almost asleep, I still think I hear it. That slow scraping sound. Paper sliding across carpet. And every single time, I have to force myself to not look at the door. I've always been the cautious one in my family. Not paranoid, not overly suspicious, just observant enough to notice when something feels wrong. My younger brother, Caleb, was the exact opposite. He trusted everyone. He could meet a stranger in line at a gas station and walk away convinced he made a lifelong friend. It used to drive me crazy. He had this way of seeing the best in people even when there were obvious reasons not to. For most of our lives, that trait just led to awkward situations. A random guy at a coffee shop suddenly joining our table, some overly friendly tourist convincing him to help carry luggage. Harmless stuff. Then last summer, that same trusting nature nearly got both of us killed. It happened during a weekend trip to South Carolina. Our parents had rented a beach condo in a town called Briar Cove every August for years. And once we became adults, the tradition shifted into a more casual sibling getaway. That summer, it was just Caleb and me. No parents, no extended family, just 4 days by the ocean before I had to return to my nursing job in Charlotte. The drive down was easy. Clear skies, windows down, music blasting. By late afternoon, we crossed into Briar Cove. The place was exactly what you'd expect from a coastal tourist town. Rows of pastel condos, seafood restaurants packed with sunburned vacationers, golf carts buzzing along narrow side streets. The kind of place that feels cheerful during the day and strangely hollow after dark. Our condo sat in a tall white complex overlooking the beach. Unit 814, 8th floor, corner balcony. The view was incredible. You could see the ocean stretching endlessly in one direction and the glowing strip of downtown bars in the other. Caleb was already talking about nightlife before we'd even unpacked. "Tonight's gonna be fun," he said, grinning as he hauled his bag inside. I should have known then that trouble was coming. That first evening, we kept things simple. Dinner at a seafood place downstairs, a walk on the beach, a couple of drinks on the balcony. Nothing unusual. The next morning, we were on the sand by 8. Caleb had this annoying ability to make instant conversation with anyone nearby. Within 20 minutes, he'd already introduced himself to 3 separate groups. That's how he met them, the couple who called themselves Ryan and Elise. They appeared out of nowhere just after 10. Ryan was probably late 20s. Tall, athletic build, sun-bleached hair, expensive sunglasses. The kind of polished charm that feels almost rehearsed. Elise looked younger, mid-20s maybe. Dark hair tucked beneath a massive floppy beach hat. Oversized sunglasses covered most of her face. Even in 90 degrees heat, she wore loose black pants and a long-sleeved linen shirt. She looked deeply uncomfortable standing there in the sunlight. Ryan, on the other hand, was all smiles. "Mind if we join you?" he asked. Before I could answer, Caleb grinned and waved them over. Of course. I immediately noticed the imbalance between them. Ryan talked constantly. Elise barely spoke. When she did, her voice was soft and clipped, like she was choosing each word carefully. She never once removed her sunglasses. At first, I assumed she was simply shy, but the longer they sat with us, the stranger things felt. Ryan mirrored everything Caleb did. If Caleb laughed, Ryan laughed. If Caleb leaned back, Ryan copied the postures seconds later. It was subtle enough to dismiss if you weren't paying attention. I was paying attention. Then there was Elise. She kept glancing toward our condo building, not casually, intently, like she was studying it. Twice, I caught her looking directly at me. Each time she turned away so quickly it felt deliberate. After about an hour, Ryan suggested drinks later that night. "There's a rooftop bar downtown, best place in Briar Cove." Caleb immediately seemed interested. I gave him a look. He ignored it. "We'll see," I said politely. Ryan smiled. "Cool. We're in your building, actually. Small world." That got my attention. "What unit?" He hesitated, just for a second. 806. Something about the pause bothered me, but before I could press further, he stood. "Catch you guys later." Elise rose silently. As they walked away, I swear she seemed frightened. Back upstairs, I told Caleb exactly what I thought. "They're weird." He laughed. "You think everyone's weird." "No, I think people who can't answer what room they're staying in are weird." Maybe I was. Still, unease lingered. That night, around 12:30 a.m., Caleb went downstairs to grab snacks from the lobby market while I showered. When he returned, he was grinning. Ran into Ryan again. Of course he did. Apparently, Ryan had invited us to the rooftop bar again. Caleb wanted to go. I didn't. After some mild arguing, we compromised. One drink, then back. The bar sat on top of a 12-story hotel overlooking the boardwalk. Loud music, string lights, ocean wind carrying the smell of salt and alcohol. Ryan and Elise were already there. Ryan greeted Caleb like they were old friends. Elise barely acknowledged us. Throughout the evening, Ryan kept asking strangely specific questions. How long were we staying? Were we alone? Did anyone else have access to our condo? Did housekeeping come daily? The questions were framed casually, but they stood out. At one point, while Caleb was ordering drinks, Ryan leaned closer to me. "You seem tense." "I'm fine." He smiled. "You don't trust me." It wasn't a question. I said nothing. His smile widened slightly. "That's smart." Then he walked away. We left 15 minutes later. Back at the condo, I locked the deadbolt and chain. Caleb rolled his eyes. "Seriously?" "Yes." I checked the balcony door too, locked. Then I went to bed. Sometime after 2 a.m., I awoke to the sound of knocking. 3 soft taps, not at the front door, at the balcony door. My eyes snapped open. The room was dark except for moonlight spilling through the curtains. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. Then it came again. 3 taps, slow, deliberate. The balcony was 8 floors up. No one should have been out there. I sat up carefully. Across the room, Caleb was still asleep on the pull-out couch. Another tap. I stood and crept toward the curtains. My hand shook as I pulled one edge aside. At first, I saw nothing. Then a face rose slowly into view from below the balcony railing. A man's face, smiling. Ryan. His fingers gripped the edge of the railing as if he'd climbed up from the balcony beneath ours. He lifted one hand and waved, then mouthed 4 words I'll never forget. "Let us inside now." Before I could react, something moved behind him. A second face emerged from the darkness. Elise. Her sunglasses were gone, and running down both sides of her cheeks were streaks of fresh blood. She looked directly at me, then shook her head violently. "No, no, no." That's when Caleb woke up and screamed because behind me, someone was already inside. Caleb's scream hit me like an electric shock. I spun around so fast I nearly stumbled over the coffee table. At first, all I could make out was a dark figure standing in the middle of the living room, motionless, watching us. The moonlight from the balcony barely illuminated him, but it was enough. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black, his face hidden beneath a ski mask. For one surreal second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I had checked every lock before bed, the deadbolt, the chain, the balcony door, everything. So how was he standing there? The answer hit me instantly. The front door. He must have entered while we were asleep, which meant he either had a key or someone had let him in. My eyes snapped toward the balcony. Ryan was gone. Only Elise remained, gripping the railing, her blood-streaked face pale with terror. She was still shaking her head frantically. The intruder moved first. He lunged toward Caleb. My brother barely had time to roll off the pull-out couch before the man slammed into it, knocking the entire frame sideways. Caleb hit the floor hard. I grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a ceramic lamp from the side table, and hurled it. It struck the intruder squarely in the shoulder. He staggered but didn't fall. Instead, he turned toward me. That was when I saw the knife in his hand. Long, thin, reflecting moonlight. Everything after that happened in a blur. I screamed for Caleb to run. The intruder charged. I ducked just as he slashed downward. The blade missed my face by inches and buried itself in the couch cushion. Caleb tackled him from the side, The two of them crashed into the glass coffee table, shattering it. I bolted for the front door, fumbling with the deadbolt. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip it. Behind me, I heard grunting, struggling, furniture scraping violently across the floor. Then Caleb shouted my name. I turned just in time to see the intruder throw him backward. He hit the wall hard enough to knock a framed painting loose. The man came for me next. Instinct took over. I yanked the door open and sprinted into the hallway, screaming for help. Caleb was right behind me. The intruder followed. For several terrifying seconds, the only sound was our pounding footsteps racing toward the elevator lobby. Then doors began opening. Guests emerged. Confused voices filled the corridor. The intruder hesitated. That moment of hesitation saved us. He spun and ran back toward our condo. By the time security reached the 8th floor, he was gone. So were Ryan and Elise. Police arrived within minutes. They searched the entire building. Nothing. No intruder, no trace of Ryan or Elise. No one registered under those names. No surveillance footage of them entering or exiting. It was as if they'd vanished. At first, officers treated the whole thing like a burglary attempt, until they searched our condo. That's when things became disturbing. Nothing valuable had been taken. Not our wallets, not our laptops, not Caleb's expensive watch sitting openly on the kitchen counter. Instead, investigators found something else. Our bedroom had been carefully photographed. Dozens of Polaroids lay spread across the bed. Pictures taken while we slept. Close-ups of our faces, our hands, even one taken from directly above me while I was lying in bed. The timestamp showed it had been taken less than 30 minutes before we woke up. Then they found the front door lock. There were no signs of forced entry, but tucked inside the mechanism was a small strip of molded wax, a key impression. Someone had copied our key. The police questioned everyone. Hotel staff, security, guests. No answers. Then, around dawn, one of the detectives knocked on our temporary room. He looked grim. They had identified Elise, or rather the woman we knew as Elise. Her real name was Hannah Mercer. She'd been reported missing 9 months ago in Savannah, Georgia. According to her family, she had disappeared while vacationing with her boyfriend. The boyfriend never identified. Her case had gone cold. The detective showed us a photo. It was her. Same face, same dark hair, but healthy, alive-looking. Nothing like the terrified woman we'd seen on the balcony. That left one obvious question. Who was Ryan? They didn't figure it out until later that afternoon. A detective called with the update. Ryan was actually Daniel Keene, 34, wanted in 3 states, suspected in multiple disappearances involving tourists along the southeastern coast. He had a pattern: target friendly travelers, gain trust, learn their routines, then strike. In every previous case, his victims had vanished before anyone could intervene. Hannah Mercer had likely been one of them. Somehow, she'd survived, held captive, forced to help lure others. The blood on her face? The detective believed Daniel had beaten her before bringing her to our balcony that night. Punishment for resisting. 2 days later, they found their rented vehicle abandoned near a marina 15 miles south. Inside were traces of blood, Hannah's, but neither she nor Daniel were ever found. Caleb and I returned home shaken but physically unharmed. For months, neither of us slept well. Every creak in my apartment made me bolt upright. Caleb, who used to trust everyone without hesitation, changed completely. He became cautious, reserved, different. Sometimes he still jokes that I finally proved my paranoia had practical uses, but there's nothing funny about what happened. The part that haunts me most isn't the masked man in our condo. It isn't the knife. It isn't even those photographs. It's Elise, Hannah, that final image of her standing behind Ryan on the balcony, blood running down her face, desperately trying to warn us, trying to save strangers even while trapped in whatever nightmare Daniel had forced her into. Every few months, I still search online for updates. Anything, any evidence they found her, any evidence she escaped. So far, nothing. And sometimes, late at night, I think about what would have happened if I'd trusted Ryan the way Caleb did, if we'd invited them in earlier, if we'd gone back to their quote-unquote unit, if Elise hadn't warned us. Then I remember those 4 silent words Ryan mouthed through the glass. Let us inside now. And I realized something horrifying. He wasn't asking. He was telling us, because by then, he already knew someone else had beaten him to it.